Ever wonder what happens when a country decides, like, we're going to fast forward into being a tech superpower? Not just keeping pace, but, like, setting a whole new speed limit for everyone.
It's a bit like that old saying, right? Move fast and break
Yes,
things.
exactly. But in this case, we're talking about a country, China, and their strategy of techno-developmentalism. And to help us break this all down, we're diving into Ya-Wen Lei's book, The Gilded Cage.
Fantastic book. It's not just about, robots and algorithms. It gets into the human side of this massive technological transformation.
Which is what makes this deep dive so fascinating. So, before we get into the nitty-gritty, what exactly is techno-developmentalism?
Imagine this. A country decides that technology isn't just about gadgets or even just, progress. It's the key why to their entire national strategy. Economic growth, even social control. It all flows from tech. That's China's techno-developmentalism in a nutshell.
And it's not just theory, right? This is playing out in real time with real consequences, which Lai gets into by talking to, well, everyone.
Right, government officials, tech CEOs, but also, and this is key, she talks to factory workers, people actually on the ground experiencing these massive shifts firsthand.
So we're not getting just the official press release here. We're getting into the nitty-gritty. One thing that really struck me was her analogy of the birdcage logic. Can you unpack that for us a bit?
Yeah, that's one of those interesting parts of the book. So picture this. The cage represents China's overall development path, right? The direction the government wants to take the country in.
Okay, I'm picturing it, a very gilded cage, perhaps.
Exactly. And inside this cage, you've got all these different industries. These are the birds. Now, some of these industries are considered old birds. Maybe they're labor intensive, not seen as high-tech enough for this new vision.
So what happens to the old birds?
The government lets them kind of fade away, maybe even nudges them towards the exit. It's all about making room for the new birds.
The new birds being?
Think AI, robotics, renewable energy, these shiny high-tech sectors. These are the industries that get the royal treatment, government funding, favorable policies, you name it.
Wow. So was there like a techno-developmentalism memo that went out or something? Like, how did this whole thing even start?
You could almost say that. It goes back to the mid-2000s. China was already a manufacturing powerhouse, but they were hitting a wall. They knew that relying on cheap labor wasn't sustainable in the long run.
Then, of course, the 2008 financial crisis happened, which, if I'm being honest, felt like the whole world hit a wall.
And that's the thing. Instead of panicking, China saw it as an opportunity. While other countries were reeling, they doubled down on this idea of techno-developmentalism. They poured money into research and development, created these incredibly ambitious industrial policies.
A calculated risk for sure, but how do they decide which new birds got the VIP treatment? Did they just, like, throw money at anything with the circuit board?
This is where it gets really interesting. See, the Chinese government has this thing about metrics. They are obsessed with scientizing everything. They measure practically every aspect of their economy and use those numbers to drive policy.
So, like, my fitness tracker, but for an entire nation, they're literally tracking their progress in real time.
Exactly. Lai calls it governance by indicators. And it's not just some abstract concept. They have these detailed evaluation forms for businesses where everything is measured and ranked. How much they spend on R&D, the number of patents they hold it, all factors into their score.
So if a factory isn't hitting those benchmarks, even if they're making a great product, they're kind of out of luck.
You're starting to see how it all works. It's about more than just numbers. It's about the government shaping the very fabric of their economy, one meticulously tracked data point at a time.
Okay, governance by indicators, shaping the economy one data point at a time. Sounds impressive on paper, but I imagine not everyone was thrilled to have the government as their, like, personal tech advisor.
You're telling me.
What about the people behind those data points, the ones actually living through this massive technological transformation?
And that's where Lei's book really shines. She doesn't just talk about policies. She introduces you to the factory owners, the workers, even the tech entrepreneurs, all trying to navigate this new landscape.
So we see the human cost of the China tech miracle story. Let's start with those old birds we were talking about. What happened to the industries deemed not high-tech enough for this new vision?
Imagine you're a factory owner, right? You've built a business from the ground up. You've got decades of experience, a loyal workforce.
Sounds like a lifetime of work.
Exactly. And then suddenly you're told your methods are outdated, your products are irrelevant. It was a harsh reality for a lot of businesses.
Okay, but they didn't just, like, bulldoze factories, right? How did they actually get these old birds to change their tune?
Wow. Convince might not be the right word. Lei talks about these intense regulatory crackdowns. Factories were hit with all these new environmental standards, safety protocols, all meticulously tied back to those government indicators we talked about.
So it's like comply or close-up shop.
Pretty much. And even if you were willing to play the game, the rules kept changing. The government was constantly raising the bar, pushing for faster upgrades, more
Gosh, it
automation.
sounds exhausting, frankly, just trying to keep up.
It really was.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine what it must have been like for the workers.
Yeah, this couldn't have been good for them.
One of the most powerful parts of the book is when Lei talks to these factory workers, people who had spent their lives mastering a craft, only to be told their skills were obsolete, replaced by robots.
There was this one quote from a worker that really stayed with me, something like, "It feels like the machines are learning faster than I ever could."
It's heartbreaking, honestly. The government was pouring billions into subsidizing automation, pushing this idea of a robot dream, a future where China leads the world in robotic manufacturing. But for a lot of workers, it felt like a nightmare.
It's that classic tension between, like, progress and its cost. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of new technology, but there's always a human side to these massive shifts. And even with all the robots, they still need people to write the code, design those robots, right?
Exactly.
So were things any better for the tech workers? The ones building this new China?
That's where it gets even more interesting. You'd think the tech sector, the new birds themselves, would be immune to all this pressure, but it wasn't the case.
Really? Even the golden children of this whole techno-developmentalism thing.
Especially them, in a way. Remember that obsession with metrics we talked about? It was everywhere. Software engineers, often hailed as, like, the heroes of this new China, were under immense pressure to deliver.
To innovate, come up with the next big thing, constantly prove their worth. It's a lot of pressure.
And it wasn't just the pressure to succeed, it was the sheer workload. These guys were expected to work around the clock, pulling all-nighters, sacrificing their health and well-being in the name of, national progress.
So they traded one pressure cooker, the factory floor, for another, the pressure to code the future. It seems like this system was designed to, like, extract as much value from people as possible, no matter who they were or what they did. Did anyone push back against these insane working conditions?
It's a tough one. See, there was this immense pride in being part of China's tech boom, this feeling of contributing to something bigger than themselves. But underneath that, there was definitely this growing sense of resentment.
Like they're being exploited.
Exactly. And that's where Lai introduces this really interesting term, coding peasants.
Coding peasants. That seems not contradictory.
Right. How can you be a peasant and cutting-edge technology at the same time?
Yeah.
And that's the irony Lei highlights. Despite their skills in education, many tech workers, especially those not at the very top, felt like they were treated as expendable, working long hours for low pay, constantly under pressure, all while dealing with, skyrocketing housing costs just like everyone else.
It's kind of wild to think about, right? This whole system meant to propel China forward, this high-tech utopia, ends up creating these coding peasants, the very people building it all struggling to keep up.
And it's not just the tech workers, right? Remember those factory workers we talked about, the ones being replaced by robots?
Yeah, the human cost of all
Right.
this progress. It seems like even in a system supposedly all about control, those human elements find a way to disrupt things.
Exactly. And by the late 2010s, those cracks started to show in a big way.
You talking about that whole crackdown on tech companies a few years back? I remember it being huge GE news, but the details were always a bit murky.
Right. So picture this. It's 2020, and Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba, basically, China's Amazon canner, he comes out and publicly criticizes the government's financial regulations.
Okay, so he bit the hand that kind of built his whole empire. Bold move.
Understatement. It was like he poked a sleeping dragon. Suddenly, the government's everywhere, new regulations, investigations. They even halt the IPO of Ant Group, Alibaba's financial arm, which was going to be huge GE.
Talk about a power move. What was the deal there? Were they really that worried about one guy speaking out, or was it something bigger?
It was about sending a message. Remember how we were talking about control? This is about the government reasserting its dominance, making it clear that no one, not even Jack Ma, is bigger than the party.
Makes sense. But I gotta imagine it wasn't just about, like, putting one guy in his place. There had to be more to it than that.
Oh, absolutely. Remember all those social costs we talked about? The income inequality, the concerns about tech monopolies. The government knew they couldn't just ignore those issues forever.
So this crackdown, it wasn't all about control then. there was some genuine concern about the downsides of this whole techno-developmentalism thing.
Exactly. They were feeling the pressure to, like, course correct a bit. And they did make some changes, especially when it came to workers' rights.
Like what?
They started cracking down on things like excessive overtime, pushing for better pay and benefits, especially in the gig economy. Those delivery drivers working crazy hours.
Yeah, those guys definitely needed some protection. But did it actually make a difference? Did workers' lives actually get any better?
It's complicated. Some workers are like, finally, someone's looking out for us. But there was also this undercurrent of fear, worry, that the government's involvement, even if it's well-intentioned, might backfire.
It's that classic dilemma, right? Wanting better conditions, but also not wanting to rock the boat too much, especially when your livelihood's tied to this whole system.
Exactly. And then there's the whole national pride thing, right? People wanting China to succeed on the world stage, even if it means personal sacrifice.
It's a lot to unpack. But if there's one thing I'm taking away from this whole conversation, it's that there's no easy answer when it comes to tech and progress.
Absolutely. And the Gilded Cage, it doesn't give you a blueprint. It makes you think, makes you question.
Which is what a good deep dive should do, right? It's about looking beyond the shiny surface, asking the tough questions about the cost of progress, the role of government, the experiences of everyday people, and maybe, just maybe, learning from each other along the way. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. Until next time.